The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. The Canada goose and the Vancouver Island marmot. Two iconic species in very different situations. We're going to hear about a pair of efforts on today's show. One to get our goose population under control, and one to bring marmots back from the brink. Nanaimo's launched a bid looking for contractors to do some Canada goose egg addling. At the same time, the Marmot Recovery Foundation is hiring for a pair of positions this summer. Before we get into working with marmots, let's dive into how, when, and why Canada geese became a problem on Vancouver Island.
My name is Kevin Bridges. I'm a registered professional biologist and the environmental protection officer with the city of Nanaimo.
And what is Nanaimo's history with geese?
So Nanaimo's history, and I guess to some extent Vancouver Island's history with geese, is that Canadian geese were introduced to Vancouver Island in the late 1960s and the 70s by Ducks Unlimited to enhance hunting opportunities for those hunters out there. One of the problems with this introduction was, of course, there was not that many geese on the island at the time, as well as they introduced geese that were not mature and had not been taught by adult geese to get up and migrate when the temperatures get cooler, as most geese, natural populations of geese do. So that's how we've got started with geese on Vancouver Island. And the conflict that Canada geese create there's basically three main conflicts. There's the human conflict, which is where Canada geese and humans come into contact. For example, recreation areas, sports fields, beaches, and cemeteries. There's concern about the aggressive nature that geese can have. There's issues around the defecation the geese produce, and playing in those sorts of environments. And same with beaches. No one wants to be on a beach with geese poop everywhere. And then the second conflict is an agricultural conflict where massive flocks of geese will do a lot of crop damage on a farmer's field and then move from one field to the next. And that's not as much of a concern here in Nanaimo as the human conflict is, but is definitely an issue in other parts of Vancouver Island. And the last, I wouldn't say the last one, but the other major one is habitat loss. Canadian geese graze on a carrick sedge in estuaries. That carrick sedge habitat provides important habitat for juvenile salmon. And when the geese graze on that carricks in mass numbers, they tear the sedges up by the roots and they destabilize the organic soil layer that's in that area. And of course that makes those soils prone to erosion by the river, and it gets washed away. And it takes many, many, many years to produce those environments to maintain those habitats. So those are the main concerns with geese. And that's why there's several municipalities across Vancouver Island now that are looking at geese and how to manage those significant populations and to resolve some of these conflicts.
So you mentioned there a bit about geese and migrating and not migrating. I think most people imagine geese flying south for the winter. Is that not the case with some of the geese we have here on Vancouver Island?
No, so that's the challenge we have here, is that you're correct. I mean, Canada geese is recognized as a migratory bird, is covered by provisions under the Migratory Bird Convention Act, a number of things like that. But what's happened with this introduced population is there's a variety of the amount of migration that some of these birds do. So you have everything from resident birds that move back and forth between local areas to true migrant birds, which are the ones that fly south in the winter and move north to breed in the summer. And you have everything in between. We have partial migrants, you have regional migrants, et cetera, et cetera. So the issue we have here is we have a lot of resident birds in the Nanaimo population, and those are the birds that seem to stay around all year long. So the city's program, we do two significant things. First, we have a monitoring program where we monitor the population abundance and residence time, I guess, if you will, of Canada geese here in Nanaimo. We've done that through a study that started in 2016 with a fellow from VIU that came to us and said, "Hey, I would like to do this," and he has continued that monitoring now since 2016 to today. And what we found is surprising to us. We, most think, population in Nanaimo, resident geese, they're all residents. And what we found through that study is that, we have about 40% resident geese, and 60% are another form of migratory, whether that's regional or true migrants. We don't exactly know how it all breaks down, but we can say that we have about 40% resident geese, and that our population of geese in Nanaimo fluctuates seasonally. So in April or in the spring, we'll probably have around 200 birds, and in the winter, we probably have about 800 birds in what we call the Nanaimo study area, which is from Cedar to Nanoose.
So there are actually more geese here in the winter than in the warmer months?
Correct. Yeah. So they stop here because, of course, our climate allows for it. So there's grass, there's food, there's everything they need.
And is this an issue for other communities across Vancouver Island or maybe in other parts of Canada?
So I can only speak to Vancouver Island because there's different scenarios going on across Canada, but I would say that actually across Canada as well as potentially worldwide, there are a lot of Canadian geese around, and there are some reports out there that suggest that there are too many in Canada. That being said, to comment, the answer to the question is for Vancouver Island. There are other communities that are involved with Canada geese management and have these same conflicts. For example, the Capital Regional District is just starting up a program for Canada geese down there. A lot of their issues are agricultural issues. Parksville has been managing geese for, I don't know, since 2015 or 16 anyway. But theirs is a human conflict issue with birds on the beaches and that sort of stuff. Campbell River has an issue. It's mostly an estuary issue, so a habitat issue. So there's all kinds of different issues for different communities.
And you talked about what Nanaimo is doing in conjunction with VIU in terms of tagging the birds and studying their migration and observing them. Are we doing anything in terms of managing the population? The
city of Nanaimo has had what we call an addling program since about 1999. That continues today. In about 2013, we put more effort into our addling program, and that is egg addling is a program which is probably the most humane means for population management or reduction. That can be done for Canada geese. Basically, what happens is during breeding season, you visit the nest and you prevent the eggs from hatching. This is all done and permitted through permits from Environment and Climate Change Canada and Canadian Wildlife Service. It follows the Canadian Wildlife Service protocols for best management practices. And like I said, it's one of the most humane and effective means of, if not reducing, but at least maintaining a population.
So the idea there is that going into geese nests and not taking the eggs, but making the eggs so they won't hatch and replacing them is what egg addling is basically?
Correct. And yeah, we leave the eggs in the nest so that the goose won't reclutch or relay, because that's what goose will do. So if you take the eggs away from the nest, then the goose will relay, maybe not the same number, but they will relay, and it kind of defeats the purpose. So the eggs, like I said, there's a mechanism for preventing the egg from hatching, and then those eggs are left in the nest for the duration of gestation, if you will.
Do geese have any natural predators out there?
There are some natural predators out there. Eagles are one, especially for goslings. Bears raid their nests. What else? Were there any of the minks and those types of animals will definitely get at their nests if they can. That being said, the geese are very, very protective of their nests and can fend off quite a surprisingly aggressive predators. But yes, there are some natural predators, but not as many on Vancouver Island as there would be, if you will, in places where they would naturally.
Anything else you think it's important folks know about this issue? Well,
I think it's important also to know that as part of our program here, we also have a monitoring program. So I feel it's really important that if we're going to be using some population control means, that we need to be looking at, monitoring the population and having that monitoring show us if we're having effect on the population, as well as kind of guide us in our next steps in potential management strategies. So, as you mentioned before, through a student at VIU who came to us in his last year at school and said, "Hey, I would like to do a monitoring program." So at that time, in 2016, we captured and collared or tagged 200 geese and released them back into the population, and we tracked those geese. The following year, we did another 200 geese, and we're tracking those geese, and we're still doing this program today. As a matter of fact, last year we collared another. I think it was that we only got 154 geese collared last year, or something in that. Don't quote me on that number, but we're adding to that marked pool, if you will, so that we can track those geese. And this is how we've come about to understand that that our stratification of the population here in Nanaimo of Geese is and how it stratifies between resident and migrant birds. So we can see we've had birds, stay in Nanaimo. We've had birds as far north that have Nanaimo collars on them, as far north as CHLY Island, in the North Island of Vancouver Island. We've had them as far south as the border between California and Oregon. And we've also had one recorded in a park in Chicago, Illinois, as far east as that. So we can see the diversity of that, and we continue to do that monitoring, which is really important, by the same student who's no longer a student, but the same gentleman is still doing the work. And it really helps guide us in knowing whether our practices are being effective or not. One of the things I can say is about our old addling program, and through this monitoring that we do, we've actually shown that we've actually reduced the amount of goslings produced by 50%.
So if folks see a goose around town with a kind of long paper-looking collar around its neck, that is almost certainly from the program we've been talking about today at VIU, the monitoring and tracking?
That's correct. And that program today is actually funded by the city as well, through a similar contract that, like the one we're putting out for addling. And it'll be going for another 5 years, we hope, to be able to do more monitoring for the next 5 years as well, to give it continue to help guide us with, like I said, next steps on management of the geese.
Kevin Bridges is the Environmental Protection Officer with the City of Nanaimo.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Support Midcoast Morning and CHLY's nonprofit newsroom today by becoming a sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. Local news can't survive without your support. Another way to help us out is to share this show with your friends and tell them why they should support us. Finally, if you're listening to the podcast edition of Midcoast Morning, go and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast feed you use. It helps people find us.
It's Canada's most endangered mammal. It's also the only mammal species endemic to British Columbia. Right now they're hibernating away, but don't sleep on your chance to work with the Vancouver Island marmot. The Marmot Recovery Foundation is a non-profit charitable organization with a mission to recover the wild population of the Vancouver Island marmot. They're currently hiring for a pair of positions that would start this summer. To learn what it takes, I got in touch with the Foundation's Malcolm McCady.
My name is Malcolm McCady, and I'm the project veterinarian and the captive breeding coordinator for the Marmot Recovery Foundation. I have one of the best jobs there is.
And what exactly does that job entail?
Well, my job entails, overall, the overreaching goal is to try and recover the Vancouver Island marmots, first from extinction, and then to increase the numbers to the point where the population is self-sustaining and resilient. So I am responsible for coordinating the captive program. So we have a breeding facility up at Mount Washington. We also have partnerships with the Toronto Zoo and the Calgary Zoo, which also have breeding programs for the Vancouver Island marmot. So I'm responsible for coordinating that, overseeing the health of the marmots. We're also involved in releasing marmots from captivity to the wild. And another thing I do, because marmots are a hibernating species, their weight varies quite significantly over the course of the year. So we can't fit them with conventional radio collars to track them. So we actually surgically implant radio transmitters. And so I'm also involved in that as well as a veterinarian.
So they're almost like cyborg marmots in a way.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, they do have electronics that allow us to track them through the mountains. Otherwise, it'd be very difficult because when you think about a place like Strathcona Park and you're looking for a creature that's the size of probably a well-fed house cat, it can be very difficult to find them and see them, especially given the fact that they also spend a great portion of their lives underground. So we need the radio transmitters to track them and make sure that they're doing okay out there.
Yeah, speaking of the underground part, I imagine that's where all of the marmots are right now. Where are they hibernating?
Well, I guess the first thing I'll say, we have a facility up at Mount Washington, and so it's a captive breeding facility. It's also where we stage the marmots for release. So we've actually got 115 marmots in the building right now, which is quite a large number, and they're all hibernating. And that's also what the marmots in the wild are doing as well, is hibernating. So they go through this period of torpor where their body temperature drops significantly. Their heart rate slows to probably 4 beats a minute. They might take a breath or two a minute. And they go for about 6 or 7 months without eating, just entirely subsisting on their fat reserves. So that's what the marmots are doing right now.
You mentioned that's the reason that you can't fit like a conventional radio collar around them. How much does a marmot change? How much weight does it lose?
Well, they can actually lose between 30 and 50% of their weight during the hibernation period. And so, they only have a few months during the summer to really put that on. So it's really sort of a boom and bust kind of lifestyle that they have.
And I understand that right now you're looking for people who want to work with the marmots this upcoming summer.
That's right. So we have two kinds of positions available for the right people to join our already existing team. So we've got one position which is a field position. So the people the person who gets the job or persons who get the job are responsible for going out and tracking the marmots through the landscape. So that includes telemetry. So, following their radio transmitters. It also includes just going out and looking for the marmots. In the spring, we also supplementally feed the marmots. So when there's lots of snow on the ground, the food reserves might not be very good for them. So in order to help them out, we do provide feeders and food. So the field crew is responsible for that. And also, as we get later into the summer, the people are also responsible for helping us release the marmots, so the captive marmots being released to the wild. And we also live trap marmots in the wild to fit them with radio transmitters. So the field crew people will be responsible for helping us to trap those marmots. And then the other position is actually at our Mount Washington facility And it's really a animal care position looking after the marmots that are in our captive facility. So that's sort of, meeting their daily needs for food, making sure that we've got proper observations, they produce a lot of waste as well. So cleaning up after them. And so it's just attending to their basic needs. So those are the two sorts of positions that the Marmot Recovery Foundation is currently advertising.
What kind of experience does someone need to have to work with marmots in either of those capacities?
Well, I would say the first is in both of those positions, the right attitude, because sometimes, when you're doing this sorts of work, the marmots don't recognize sort of an 8-hour day. So sometimes the days are long. So the right attitude, but for the field work, I think it's really someone who is fit, someone who is comfortable living in field conditions, spending time in the mountains of Vancouver Island. They're able to put up with a variety of different weather conditions. I mean, sometimes it can be hot, as we know, during the summertime, but sometimes in the mountains, I mean, you get snowed on, you get rained on. So you're sort of dealing with that. You're you're spending time in an environment that has large predators, so bears and cougars. So they have to be comfortable with that as well. And they also have to be able to get along with their teammates. They have to be good observers. So obviously they have to be able to see the marmots as well, and have an open mind and be willing to learn. So that's for the field position. I think the animal care position is people who have had experience working with relatively large numbers of animals, and not just being able to feed and clean, but also being good observers and being sort of empathetic and being able to notice the nuances of the marmots on sort of a daily basis, to see changes in their demeanor, perhaps, that sort of thing. So good field experience in one situation, and in the other situation, just experience taking care of animals and their needs.
What exactly is a marmot like to handle?
Well, so they are wild animals, so we actually don't handle them, except we use immobilization drugs in order to get hands on. Having said that, I mean they're certainly not aggressive if they're not cornered or threatened. They are rodents, so they can deliver quite a serious bite. I think other than that, they're fairly passive, as long as they're not threatened.
And overall, how is the marmot population doing right now?
Well, I should put things in context. Like, this is still one of the rarest mammals in the world, and it's endemic to Vancouver Island. So when we reached our low point in 2003, the wild population was less than 30 individuals. And 2023, so our last field season, actually there's quite a bit of promise in the numbers. So we had marmots at 34 different sites, and the population was estimated to be about 304 individuals. So, quite a significant increase. So last year was a really good year for the marmots, and we're hoping to build on that in 2024 with a good team of people in our field staff and animal care staff.
And you mentioned earlier on today that there are just over 100 marmots who are kind of indoors hibernating right now. Is that roughly the distribution? Like around a third of the marmots are in captivity still and the rest are in the wild?
Yeah, so actually, that's right. So overall in the captive population, so including the marmots we have at Calgary and Toronto, there's 149 in captivity, and then 304 in the wild. So that's right.
Gotcha. So the total, 304 is the total wild population, but there might actually be 450-ish of these marmots alive.
Yeah, that's correct.
Gotcha. Is there anything else you think folks need to know about the Vancouver Island marmot right now?
I think that, people really think highly of marmots, and I think the Vancouver Island marmot, because the Marmot Recovery Foundation is a charity, and we do receive some government support and some corporate support as well, but over 70% of our support comes from the public, and so that says to me that people think an awful lot about Vancouver Island marmots. They place them with high esteem, and so I guess we realize that, and we're doing our absolute best to try and recover this species for the people who support the program.
Malcolm McCady is the project veterinarian and the captive breeding coordinator for the Marmot Recovery Foundation. That's our story for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and Arby Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom and more. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you would like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Also, share the podcast with your friends. While Meta is blocking Canadian users from sharing news content on their Facebook feeds, you can still share our podcast directly with your friends via Facebook or Instagram Messenger. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Nanaimo First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.